welcome to the Bald Ambition Podcast. I'm your very bald host, Mookie Spitz. And the one with ambition today is Mr. Barry Todd. Welcome aboard the podcast, Barry.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor. I appreciate it.
We appreciate it too. You're a former Army captain, Army Ranger, and your ambition with us today is to remind us of our personal freedoms and our rights before the law. And you, from what I can tell, learned all these things the hard way. Can you give us a little bit of background about you, your career, what happened to you, the implications of it, and what you're sharing with the world through your book, Stand Your Ground, which is available through all the usual distributors. And I think it's a worthwhile read for Americans to know where they stand. So give us a quick overview of your storied career and what really led you to the circumstances that you go over in the book, because then we can appreciate even emotionally what you went through.
Okay.
And what happened.
All right. Well, in a brief summary, I was born in Memphis, Tennessee. Both of my parents were military. I was raised as a military brat. They did get divorced at an early age, and I bounced between the two of their homes. My mother also worked undercover for the FBI. 5 grandparents that came over on the Mayflower because they were such a small colony at the time. They all intermingled, so I had multiple grandparents there. So my heritage goes back a long way, and we were raised on God, country, family in that order. And we have total respect for the Constitution and our country, this great republic we live in. I joined the military right out of high school. I did 21 years in the U.S. Army Rangers, served in multiple assignments all over the world. But my home base was in the Southeast in Ranger units, wherever I deployed to. I retired in 2001, became a financial advisor with another company, stayed there about 6 years, and then I started my own firm in 2008. The firm is now a national firm. We have offices from Virginia to California. Been very blessed in that aspect. I have 3 wonderful children, 4 grandchildren. I've been married for 41 years this coming August. And my home base is Yuma, Arizona, and we also have a home in Tennessee. And so that's my background. And
sounds all American to me.
Yeah, my number one truth on everything that I do is God's first. That is always number one. That's been my grounding force throughout my lifetime. I see Him, and it's always funny. Hindsight's always 20/20. You look back and you see how God was moving, and you didn't even know it. With that, 11 years ago, this past weekend, my wife and I were out with some friends, 4 other retired military couples at a retired military couples establishment. When my wife and I were threatened, I was then viciously attacked outside the establishment, not by one man, but 2 men, one of them wielding a knife, and I was attacked twice. I had to use my weapon to defend myself, and when the police showed up, I was the one that was arrested and charged without any investigation or due process. I went through 26 months and 17 days of hell through 4 grand juries, a preliminary hearing, and it never went to trial. But the judge actually, I would have been cast in the jail if I did not have a judge that had respect and knowledge of the law.
So let's give our viewers and listeners a little bit of context. Where did this assault occur? Which state did this occur?
In Arizona.
Oh, so it was in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now it sounds terrible and shocking, especially given your pedigree and your background and the overall circumstances. Why do you think this inversion of justice happened right out of the gate? Now, I'm tacitly assuming that you're with your family. You guys are minding your own business.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, they're witnesses. You were assaulted. you came to your own self-defense. Why would the mechanisms of the law and the justice system apparently flip out when it came to this instance?
Well, first off, I had an incompetent police detective. Uh, the night I was arrested, I was naive. I believed in the justice system. I still do, but I was naive. You know, everybody always said, "Don't say nothing." I had nothing to hide, so I told them everything that happened. And then they come in and they said, "Read this and sign it." And I didn't have my glasses because all that stuff was left inside because I was attacked outside. And I told them I didn't have my glasses. What am I reading and signing? And they said, "It's a charge sheet." And I said to the lead detective, I said, "A charge sheet? What am I being charged for?" He goes, attempted murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault. And I said, "I told you it was strictly self-defense." And his exact words to me were, "We have the whole thing on video." I got very excited. I said, "Great. Have you looked at the video?" His exact words to me, Mookie, was, "Not yet." Oh, you're a real intelligent life form. The oxygen was just flowing to his brain. His brain cells were just firing on all cylinders. Of course, I said some not so respectful things to him for his lack of competence. And needless to say, I was in handcuffs and taken down because I refused to sign the paper.
Well, give us a little more detailed circumstance. So they are charging you with assault. It sounds like what? Attempted murder?
Attempted murder and 2 counts of aggravated
just
assault.
for the sake of clarity and transparency, what exactly happened, at least from your recollection? That you were attacked. You mentioned that they had a knife. Presumably you were armed at the time?
No.
No.
When they first attacked me, no. I had my weapon near me, but it was not directly on me. It was in my car. So just to give you the background story, we had been there about 5 hours. My wife and I and our friends, we had dinner there. We were doing some dancing and just hanging out with friends, having a good time. This young man, who was about 20 years younger than me, outweighed me by 100 pounds, was invited to our table. He was by himself at the time, and he was an acquaintance of one of my retiree buddies. And he started getting very aggressive as he drank more throughout the night toward the ladies. And all of a sudden, probably about, it was about 10:45, 10:50, there was a karaoke song. I was invited up to sing it because it was one of my favorite songs, "My Way" by Frank Sinatra. The next thing you know, I'm singing the song, and this guy climbs up on stage, gets in my face, and I ask him to back up, and he says, "I'm going to kick your ass." And I said, "I'm not fighting you." I said, "I'm too old to get in a bar fight." So I jump off the stage, and I go to walk out the door. I got the keys from my wife. She was the designated driver. I wanted to get a fresh can of Copenhagen. And this guy follows me off stage. He threatens me again. And I said, "I'm not fighting you. I'm too old to get in a fight. This is not happening." All right. And so I walk out. He walks over to my table. He takes a drink of his beer. He looks to see, because all this is on video, he looks to see if anybody notices what just happened. He then turns around and follows me outside. Well, all his buddies are outside. All right. 2 guys and a girl. I come to walk back in carrying my Copenhagen. My car was only 40 feet from the front door. And he stops me from going in. And I said, "What is the problem?" He goes, "I'm going to teach you respect." And I said, "You're not going to teach me anything." I said, "I told you I'm not fighting you. I'm going inside." So I tried to walk around him. He pushes and shoves me. So I walk around him the other way, and I moved pretty quick. I mean, I might be 63 and at the time 52, but I could still move pretty good. I got around him, but he got hold of my belt looping from behind. He picked me up because I only weighed 167 pounds that night. He picked me up, spun me around 180 degrees and threw me headfirst into a cinder block wall. And then I came up, and the bouncer came out the door because the doors were wide open. Right. And the bouncer came out, and he didn't do much bouncing. He just stood there, hey, 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 break it up. Then I get punched in the side of the head. I said, I'll tell you what, I'm leaving. I'm going to get my belongings and my wife, and I'm leaving. And he, at that point, says, you're not going back in there, and that B is mine. He threatens my wife. At that point, I said, okay, understand, I am armed. All right. You're not going to threaten my wife. And he goes, get your effing gun. And I said, okay. So I walked to my car, got my weapon, came back in accordance with Arizona law, kept it down by my side. He was blocking the door. I looked at him. I pointed at him with my free hand. And I said, I'm going in there. I'm getting my wife and my belongings, and I'm leaving. He immediately attacked me and tried to take me down. His buddy, when he pulled the knife, was in between there and came up from behind. They dragged me down to the ground. Still to this day, I don't know why I didn't get stabbed. He was holding my weapon in his gut. The guy behind me was hitting me in the head and holding me in like a bear hug, because they both outweighed me by over 100 pounds each. And they were both about 6'3", 6'4". They both, when they weighed him in at the hospital that night, he weighed 269, and his buddy weighed more than that. And I looked at him right in his eyes. He was real up close to me, and he was pulling my revolver into his gut. And I just looked at him and I said, this is going to suck for both of us. And that's when the weapon discharged. He fell off of me. And then after that, my friends came out, broke it up. The police showed up. They put handcuffs on me. They never read me my rights. Nothing.
All right. Was he injured?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He's wearing a colostomy bag the rest of his life.
All right. And then what about witnesses to everything that you described?
All the witnesses were there, were all his friends. And that's what that's what I believe they based the charges on, without looking at the video. And so they ignored everything I said and didn't wait. And at that point, they had already plastered me all over the news. They didn't look at the videos until 12 days after they took it to the grand jury.
Now, what was on the videos? You described the videos from being inside the bar. The guy cases the joint.
Everything I just told you was on the video.
The altercation itself was on the video?
Everything. There were 16 cameras, functional cameras, in and around the building that had everything. Me walking to my car, coming back, everything.
All right. You're on video. You have them as witnesses. So what happened? Why did you find yourself in such a legal train wreck?
Well, in my opinion, it was a corrupt prosecution. We got the videos about 2 months after the incident happened. My attorneys did, and he gave it to the FBI's lead forensic video expert. And then and everything I told my attorney that had happened prior to seeing the videos was actually what happened. And so he took that to the prosecution, and the prosecution said he doesn't care. Matter of fact, I have the prosecutor on tape saying, and this was on February 17th, 2015, when my attorney was interviewing the lead investigator. The prosecutor was there, and the prosecutor said, I don't care if he followed the law. He could have come back with that gun stuck up his butt. And the problem was, at that point, they wouldn't let it go. And the good news is that the judge saw it. The judge believed in the law, and he went and he did something very unusual after the third grand jury, because the prosecutor continued to not share the video each time it was sent back to the grand jury. The judge would order him, you need to give all the self-defense laws for Arizona, and you need to show the videos. He wouldn't do it. He would only give them the basic affirmative self-defense law. And there's a big difference between affirmative defense and justification defense in 28 states now. And it's important that your viewers understand that, Mookie. if 28 states have gone over to justification defense, and once you say that it was self-defense, it's up to the prosecution to prove that it wasn't self-defense. Those laws say that you're not supposed to be charged if you say it was self-defense unless they can prove that it wasn't self-defense.
All right, that's a key takeaway for our audience. So, we live in contentious times, Second Amendment, gun rights, open carry, standing your ground, and it's a swirl of politics and culture and misunderstanding. So it sounds like you were literally and figuratively on the ass end of this situation.
Most definitely. I mean, have you ever, this is what's so hilarious about this. After the third grand jury, the judge got so frustrated with the prosecution for not sharing the video with the jurors. And this was in the fall of 2015, that he actually went and reviewed the videos and made a finding of fact that I followed the law before it ever went to trial. My attorney at the time was Michael Kimmerer, Mookie. He was one of the two attorneys on the Miranda rights case in 1969. He died a few years ago. All right. And he said, I have never seen a judge in his entire 50 plus year career at that point ever make a finding of fact prior to going to trial.
Well, I would, again, tacitly assume that if there's evidence and there's no clearer evidence than 16 video cameras, full 360 view of every freaking thing that happened, why wouldn't that be the centerpiece for evidence?
Because the prosecution did not like guns. All right. They didn't want to let the case go. And it's so funny. All he had to do was do the exact same thing my attorney did in the final preliminary hearing. In the final preliminary hearing, we didn't have to put on any evidence. All my attorney did was when he cross-examined the witnesses that the prosecution was using, the friends of the assailants, they turned around and he would play the video. And after the video was over with, he goes and he would point out where they were at in the video. And then he'd say, do you still stand by your testimony? Every single one of them recanted their testimony in their previous statement, sworn statement. Every single one of them. We didn't even have to put on any evidence. At the end of it, the judge turned around and said, Mr. Prosecutor, probable cause is a very low bar to obtain throughout the country. And he also said, and I could argue it's even lower in the state of Arizona. Mr. Todd followed the law, Arizona 13-421. He handled his weapons in accordance with that law. And there's no probable cause here. The case is dismissed. Have a good day, Mr. Todd. That took me 26 months and 17 days to hear those words.
So was it a protracted trial? Did you have to appeal? What was the mechanism for this?
So do you know what a preliminary hearing is?
Yeah. For our viewers and listeners, let's provide context and clarity.
Okay. A preliminary hearing is a mini trial, but it replaces a grand jury. After it had gone back to the grand jury a third time, the judge in the case, Judge Hawks, he said, I'm going to send it back again because still the prosecutor had not followed his instructions about presenting one of the laws I just said, Arizona 13-421, Arizona 13-411. He didn't present any of those laws to the grand jurors, and he didn't show the video. And so he was sending it back again. The prosecutor got mad, and he said, I demand a preliminary hearing, Your Honor. And basically, he didn't want to dismiss the case because of political pressure, because there was a shooting in Yuma, and he's already plastered me all over the news. He didn't want to let it go. So the judge agreed, and he actually oversaw the preliminary hearing. Now, a preliminary hearing, and people got to understand, a grand jury, there is no judge, there is no defense. The prosecutor is supposed to go in and present all the evidence, whether it helps the defense or whether it helps him. And when they present that, then they come out with charges. But they're relying on the prosecutor, who's supposed to be a minister of justice. He's not supposed to lean the scales one way or another. He's just supposed to present the facts and let them decide, is there enough evidence to bring charges? Well, he kept leaning it one way, and that was his way. And he was leaving out exculpatory evidence. So when they bring in a preliminary hearing to replace a grand jury, instead of novice individuals, 16 of them coming off the street, determining if there is probable cause, a judge actually looks at all the evidence and determines, is there a probable cause? And what is probable cause? That means there's a 50% chance or greater that the individual, that defendant, committed a crime or not.
All right. So just to put a pin in it and to summarize your situation, you went into court with an ostensibly balanced, objective judge, but there was obvious bias on the part of the prosecution. They withheld the video. It became a legal train wreck for you. And then it precipitated this domino effect of you trying to get justice in any
Correct.
way that you could. And it led to all of these hearings, all of these court dates over more than 26 months, until finally they got to, in a sense, hear your side of the story and weigh in on the obvious, which is you've got all these cameras, you've got this guy minding his own business with his family, gets assaulted, you had every right to carry, and one thing led to another, and the victim is you. And
Yeah.
what you're trying to highlight here is the biases that are inherent in our justice system. And a lot of those biases, to the point you made earlier, are motivated by a political agenda. And I'm guessing in this case, it's being anti-gun, it's being anti-carry. Is that
it's anti-Constitution?
Well, yeah, but I just want to zero in. The Constitution's pretty broad, and there's a lot of rights in it. But in this case, you have not an unsympathetic prosecution, but an overtly biased one with their own agenda. And they're using you as a scapegoat to illustrate, I guess, the dangers of carrying. And look at this guy who was out of control, and it's unacceptable, and we're going to use him as a scapegoat for our own ideology, our own anti-Second Amendment ideology. Is that accurate, how I kind of capture your circumstance?
That's how I take it. And that's how I understood it. You know, even the detective, he was an honest man. He admitted that he did not read me my rights, that, that he felt I should have just walked through the door and exposed my back to the two guys that had just attacked me. And the whole thing that was funny about it, Mookie, is even the judge picked up on that. At one point, my attorney got so frustrated with the lead detective in his cross-examination of him that he just ended. He goes, "Your Honor, I'm done with this guy." All right. The amount of mistakes that he made throughout this entire case in presuming guilt until innocent, he even got him to admit on the stand that he presumed I was guilty, even though he had denied it for 26 months before. And at the end of that, the judge goes, "Well, I have a question for him." And he said, "Mr. Detective Torres, if you had just been attacked the way Mr. Todd had been attacked, not once, but twice, and you had to draw your weapon and had to walk through the door where the guys are standing that just attacked you. And would I expect you to walk through? Would you walk through and expose your back to them? And he literally tried not to answer the question. And finally, the judge ordered him answer the question. Would you expose your back to him? And the detective goes, no, I wouldn't. He goes, thank you.
Now, there's a lot of minutia in this case, and obviously we're hearing it from you. But to me, and for our listeners and viewers, I think the point that you're making in a broader context is bias, right? So
Yeah.
regardless of the he said or she said, there was a video. And at the end state, after 26 months of this grueling experience for you, you're exonerated. Is that correct?
Correct. The case was dismissed with prejudice. The record's been sealed. It was found that I was wrongfully indicted or otherwise charged. But this is the downside of it. It give you a quick story, Mookie. My brother in 1966, his father woke him up at 2 o'clock in the morning and outside of Fort Bragg. He says, come out here on the porch, boy. There was a dead man laying on the porch. All right. He goes, grab that hose over there and wash this blood off my porch. And then 10 minutes later, a sheriff comes up the driveway, walks up on the porch, goes, what do we got going on here? And Ralph's dad goes, ask him, and pointed at the dead guy. And he goes, I can't. He's dead. He goes, exactly. So everything I'm telling you happened is what happened. Don't try to add something to it that's not true. My point to you is that, and of course he wasn't charged. The guy was trying to break into his house, and there was 8 kids and his wife in there, and he put 2 bullets in his chest. But the point of the matter is that he never went to trial. They didn't try to make something that wasn't true. Nowadays, everybody's looking for the headlines. It's no different than Daniel Penny. Everything that Daniel Penny did on that New York subway was on video. But they still ended up getting a grand jury to charge him. Why? Because they didn't show the videos. The prosecution didn't want to be the one to say, I don't have enough evidence here to charge him with anything. So they go ahead and waste all that money, that time, and they try to ruin that man's reputation. And that's the exact same thing that happened in my case and continues to happen across this country. These zealot prosecutors are out of control, and they've gotten that way since the 1982-83 ruling, where the Supreme Court ruled that prosecutors have absolute immunity. When they get into that grand jury, they lie, they manipulate it to fit it. I mean, that's where that term comes from. You can indict a ham sandwich in a grand jury. Sure.
Absolutely. So I think that the bigger story here, and again, I don't mean to downplay the minutia and the agony that you had to go through, but the end state here is letting folks know through your book, through your story, that there's bias in the American system, and it's biased against those who are trying to defend themselves.
Correct.
Okay.
110%.
Right. And that's why I got you on, which is I think it's a very important story to tell. Every story's got a he said, she said, whatever. But it seems clear, especially given your exoneration at the end of this ordeal, that your rights were violated in a way that it was trying to perpetuate another person's narrative, which is...
This is how bad it is.
Right.
You're exactly right. And you keep saying something, it's always he said, he said. 99% of everything in this book is 100% accurate. I can back it up with court transcripts, recordings, everything. The only thing that has been changed out of that entire book there were certain people that wouldn't sign release forms to use their real names. So I changed the last names of some of the people in the book. That is the only thing I did.
I'm not denying or dismissing the veridicality of what you're saying. All I'm saying is that even if people would would argue with some of your points or call out some of the minutia, you're making a bigger point, which I think is important and valid,
Well,
which
it is.
is the American system is biased and that there's agendas. And the agenda in this case, as you exemplify vividly with your story, is that this idea that Americans can and should defend themselves is under fire.
Oh, yeah. And it's been getting that way worse since the 60s and 70s when they came down so hard on fixing crime. Every time, and see what the American people, first off, what I've learned as I've gone through this whole process is most people don't realize that we're a constitutional republic. Most people can't even tell you what republic stands for. And it's Latin and it means it's a Latin word. Re means thing, and then public means public. The public thing, the law. A constitutional republic, it doesn't matter what your feelings are. All right. You have to follow the law. Whether you like it or not, you follow the law. It's the same thing with these people that are leaving the country right now, whether they're volunteering or being forced to leave, they broke the law. I don't care what the humanitarian side of it is. If you want the law changed, go to Congress. If you want the law changed in Arizona, go to the Arizona legislature, but follow the law.
Immigration is complicated, but at the end of the day, what is your status? Are you documented or undocumented? And it's got repercussions. Clearly, though, there's what's legal and what's illegal, and there's also a matter of prioritization of the resources of this government to focus on level of severity and emphasis, right? So do you go after the ones who are more hardened and providing, negative benefit to society, or do you go after everyone indiscriminately? That's another issue. But the point you're making is there's laws of the land and they should be followed. And, all right.
Just follow the law. If you want the law changed, talk to your congressman. Talk to your state legislatures.
Part of the reason I think that there might be ideological resistance to being able to, let's say, open carry, or a lot of the resistance that comes to what ostensibly be considered the Second Amendment, has to do with perceived abuses of some of these freedoms. So, for example, a counter argument to some of the Second Amendment push would be we need more safety. We need more education when it comes to gun ownership. You drive a car, you need to get a license. It's dangerous to sit behind the wheel of a 2-ton automobile going at 60, 70 miles an hour. We don't let a 5-year-old drive. And we shouldn't enable a 5-year-old to buy an AR. So that's another kind of conversation, which is, yeah, we believe in the right to carry. We might even believe in the right to open carry. And we believe in the right for self-defense. But at the same time, are we perhaps overly zealous in our willingness to enable people to buy and carry guns? So this is part of the conversation, and I think it's where part of the confusion comes from.
Are you asking my opinion?
Well, yeah, this is a podcast. It's a conversation. I mean, the reason I'm bringing this up is I'm trying to provide context for some of the stuff that you got yourself into. And I'm not justifying the pushback. I'm just illustrating that the issue is complicated.
The key thing here, Mookie, is that our Constitution is very clear. And the reason our Constitution is now the oldest governing document in the world. I mean, think about that. There's over 200 countries in the world, and some of them have been around for thousands of years. But we have the oldest governing document in the world now, the United States of America. Why is that? Because ours was written one very simple way that's different from everybody else's. Our Constitution is written and it tells the government what it cannot do, not what it can do. That very simple concept limits their ability. And so every time they pass a law that tries to overstep that, the Supreme Court kicks them back and it says, no, it's very clear. The government shall not infringe. If you don't know what that means, then go open up an 1800 dictionary when the Constitution was written, and you'll find out. It means you cannot. That being said, and you're exactly right on that. There does need to be some limits as far as who gets driver's license. I love that example. You're right. You don't give one to a 5-year-old. You also shouldn't be giving them to people with unknown names, CDL licenses that can't pass the test. That goes back to everybody.
No argument there, but I was using that as an analogy for this boundary between giving people the right to carry, giving the people the right to buy and own weapons, and a sense of governmentally mandated responsibility when it comes to education, certification, whatever. I'm not saying we should make it more restrictive.
No.
I'm merely illustrating that simply because the Constitution says that you've got a right to carry doesn't end the conversation.
No, it doesn't. And I mean, there are things that have to be taken into account. Do I believe that there's, people should go through training? Yes, I've been through a ton of training. I constantly go through training. I constantly stay proficient with the weapons that I use and that I carry. That's just common sense. That's good gun safety. But the difference is
what I'm saying, right?
But the difference is back in my day, I'm 63, right? Back in my day, you had gun courses you took in high school. Now you got all gun-free school zones throughout the country because the government got too involved. All right, so now you can't get it through the normal education system the way we used to when I was growing up. Now you have to go out and pay for it. All right, because it used to be taught in the public schools. Then on the other side of it is every time they pass a law to restrict Americans, that's freedom lost. All right, it's no different than the seatbelt. Let's take that. Let's use Arizona, perfect example. Riding a motorcycle, you do not have to wear a helmet. And up until Janet Napolitano became governor back in the early 2000s, you didn't have to have a seatbelt on. But now you got to have a seatbelt on. Now, last time I checked, I'm 63 years old. Why do I need a law telling me to have a seatbelt on? I understand if you want an 18-year-old or under having a seatbelt on or having a car seat slapped in. I got it. All right. But why does there have to be a law passed? And then you're going to pull me over and give me a ticket if I'm not wearing it. Why?
Let me explain why the government might have, the right to enforce you having a seatbelt. And the reason is you get your ass into a car accident and you're wounded and in the hospital for 2 months. We all need to pay for that.
No, so, I'm not on any government dole.
Huh?
I got my health care. Government ain't paying for nothing.
Yeah, well, anyway, having seatbelts and enforcing seatbelts, I don't know, saves probably 20, 30,000 lives per year.
But just remember.
And I think of all the things that the government does, I think, I'm willing to give up my right not to wear a seatbelt for the government to enforce everyone having a seatbelt for the public good. Here's a counterexample for you, all right? What about street lights?
I don't think you are.
Yeah. Well, Barry, what about street lights? The government will give you a ticket if you go in a red light. Is that violating your personal freedom? You can't just drive indiscriminately and do whatever the hell you want?
No, I get it. I'm not going against it. I'm just saying, think about the hypocrisy Arizona has. You don't have to have a helmet to ride a motorcycle, but you have to have a seatbelt to drive a car. I mean, think about that.
I get it, but I live in California, and motorcycles dart in and out legally of traffic.
Well, actually, most of them, especially on the interstate, don't follow the law because the traffic's not supposed to be going above 55 when they dart through traffic.
Yeah, but I'm just saying the law, to your point, I guess, the law is unevenly and often hypocritically mandated.
Exactly.
All
And so
right,
when you
I'm
create
with
too
you
many
there, and
laws,
you got screwed with some of these loopholes and also some of the corruption and
yeah,
bias that's inherent in the system. And look, I'm a libertarian-esque kind of guy. My opinion is less government is better for everybody. So I'm on your side here when it comes to this, but at the same time, I will see that some rules make sense, at least from a pragmatic point of view.
society can't function without some rules, laws. I agree with you.
Where
I
do
was
you
just
draw the
giving you
line?
that example, just like you've been giving me a ton of.
Not to get into a Second Amendment debate, but we have a gun shooting death problem here in the United States, which is unique to the world. Now, I'm not going to say that it's a consequence of the prevalence of firearms, but we do have a significant problem. Now, the question is, what's the reason or reasons that we do? Now, we have a lot of guns here. Okay, that's one of the factors. Is it causation or correlation between the number of guns in the country and the amount of violence that we have? I don't know. That's an open debate. It's worth having, though.
Well, let's have it. How many people die of heart attacks? How many people die of heart attacks a year in the United States?
That's an irrelevant false equivalence.
No, it's not.
All right, go ahead. I'm all ears for your logic here.
It's definitely a lot more. Does that mean we're going to restrict the food that people eat because of the fact that they might have a heart attack?
I had what did I had? I had a blueberry muffin before this podcast, Barry. What the actual?
I had a corn power protein drink.
What the actual?
Really good.
Does that have to do with the content of this conversation? People have heart attacks. What does that have to do with people dying from guns?
Because if you want to restrict guns to prevent deaths from guns, the only ones, number one, that are going to obey that are the people that follow the law. The people that don't follow the law, so all you're doing is disarming people. And it's not the police's job, according to the Supreme Court, or it's not the police's job, according to the Supreme Court, to defend you. All right, let's get that clear. That that protect and serve thing on the side of the police car, that's a slogan. Right? The Supreme Court. So your job is to defend yourself and your family. And I believe, according to biblical scripture, that it's my God, my requirement, my responsibility in accordance with the Bible.
All right, I'm not a religious man. I'll give you a little background for me. My parents are Hungarian, and we're Jewish. So most of my family got murdered in the Second World War, and they barely made it out of there. All right. My father's deepest regret was that they're coming to get us, and none of us have any weapons. So I grew up with the understanding that, and it's ingrained in me, and I believe it right now, that a heavily armed civilian population is necessary.
You know what?
Right? That's your last vote, is the last bullet in your gun, and I believe that based on the background of my own family. So I'm agreeing with you in principle that people could and should have guns. I'll be on the record saying that. But the point I'm making is that's not the end of the conversation. That's the beginning of the conversation. I think it's important that we understand that the prevalence of guns and how Americans treat their weapons, there's something unhealthy about it, because it might not be the prevalence of guns. You could argue one point or another, but we are irresponsible and reckless with our firearms, as evinced by the level of violence which we all have to live with. Now, if we can at least acknowledge that, there might be steps in the right direction for better education, better training, and I'm not saying restriction, but better maturity having to do with how we handle guns. That could be a conversation right there. I'm not going to argue the Second Amendment with you because I'm on your side. I'm just saying that we got a problem in this country.
All right. Well, the guns, though, 90% of those deaths, are they caused by people that illegally have the guns, or are they caused by the 5 to 10% that legally have?
Well, I don't know if you got guns around. I personally know, let's see, I know 2 people have committed suicide using their own weapon. I know 2 of them personally. Now, I'm not blaming the gun, but the fact that the gun was readily available to them, I don't know. I'm wondering if they'd still be here right now if they couldn't just be in the even worse mood than usual and blow their brains out. I just think there's a lot of suicide. There's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of school shootings. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I don't think it's healthy for the country.
You're jumping all over the place here, so I'm going to slow you down here a little bit. When did the school shootings start? When did we start having school shootings? You may not be old enough to remember, but I do.
Enlighten us.
It was in the early to mid 90s. Guess what passed when that?
Columbine was the big one, right?
And guess when that happened? A year after they passed the gun-free school zones. I carried a gun to high school. It was in the back of my vehicle. I'd lock my vehicle up and it stayed there. All right. My teachers carried weapons. They had them in their classrooms. You were taught good gun safety. They removed that.
But Barry, that's part of my point is like we need to become more mature about guns in this country. That's all I'm saying.
Oh,
and going back full circle,
national training, so there could be a national law. And why do we have this that each state has their own? I mean, for me to drive across the state line, they accept my driver's license. Why can't they accept my gun training?
Well, it's Madison versus Hamilton, buddy. It's like the federal government's going to lay it down, or you want the states to have some autonomy and some say in this.
In this case, since it's in the Bill of Rights, I think it should be very clear.
All right. Well, other people are arguing other things are in the Bill of Rights too, and then people go nuts saying that I don't want that in my state.
Like what?
Well, like, let's say equal rights, men, women, all people, how you define rights.
That's a minor few. Now you're talking fringes.
Fringes?
Yeah.
I'm talking just people.
Those are few and far between people that want to limit the rights of others.
I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, going back to your going back to your situation, I think it's important that people understand that they got rights and that the judicial system is often biased against them, and it's biased against them based on some of the ideology that people bring into the court. And your book brings that to light.
I couldn't agree with you more. And just because I know we got a little bit of time here, but the key thing is that, and there were a few lessons that I learned from this, and I like for everybody to hear. The first one is when they say, don't say anything to the police, don't say anything. All right. They tried to use me praying by myself that was a confession, because I asked God to come into my heart and forgive me for my sins when I was praying. They tried to say that was a confession at the beginning of my prayer. Crazy. And then number two is that make sure you get some type of insurance, some type of protection if you're going to carry. There's some good companies out there. do your research, find the one that best suits you, get some type of insurance protection, because it cost me just on the criminal side right around 400,000 to get clear of all this, and then it cost me another 250 to 300,000 to clear my name throughout the country so I could
That's
continue to do my
crazy.
business. Number three is remember your attorneys, your investigators, they work for you. Don't expect them to have all the answers. You have to dive into the law. You have to read the law. You have to study them. And if you don't like the strategy that they're taking, tell them, hold them accountable and say, no, you're not going to go that way. You're going to go this way. And then last but not least, take into consideration the effect that it's having on your family and your friends. Keep them close. Right? That's so important.
I have terrific advice for all legal hassles and whenever you get yourself into a bind with the law.
Yep.
And I like your attitude, which is like you start with the government empowering you to be free, not taking your rights away from you.
Okay. They took mine away right off the bat.
Well, that's why I bring that up, which is you're a tax-paying, God-fearing American citizen with the Army veteran status.
And on a national company, my wife owned a company at the time of real estate.
You're the victim, right?
And I'm like, what? And you know what's funny is this: they put up there, never been charged with a crime in my life, and they gave me a $500,000 cash only bond. I had to write them a check for $500,000. That was number one. Number two, when they allowed me to get out of jail on that bond, they restricted me. You know, I thought I was innocent until proven guilty. They put me on what is called pretrial services. I wasn't allowed to drink. They took all my guns. I had to go to the probation office once every 2 weeks so I could have a 21, 22-year-old right out of college try to psychoanalyze me to see how I was doing after I've been all over the world most of my early adult life in the Rangers at places that could make a billy goat puke and done things that nobody else will ever see. And then once a month, I would get this phone call. Tomorrow morning, you need to be down for a blood test and your analysis. It was like unbelievable. And you got to pay for all that. You got to pay for those meetings.
Right.
It's absurd.
That's why I like having you on, which is the spirit of be independent, defend yourself, and don't take for granted that the government is here to help.
No. Do like Reagan said, turn and run.
And everyone's got their own vested interest. And everyone comes in with their own implicit and even explicit biases. And
Correct.
if you follow the few best practices that you shared, at the very least, you could protect yourself a little bit better. Hindsight's 2020, right?
It is. And for your listeners out there, you get a chance, please go buy my book. All the proceeds are.
We're going to put the description of the book, your bio, in the podcast description on YouTube and on Spotify and Apple Podcast. And I think it's important that people hear your story, which is just defend yourself, protect yourself. Don't take anything for granted in this life, especially the government, either on the state or the federal level. And be free, empower yourself with knowledge. And in your case, empower yourself with this cautionary tale of an individual's rights being violated. So thank you so much for being on the podcast, Barry. Sorry you had to go through all of this. And you're a God-fearing man. Maybe God wanted your story to get out there to help other people. Do you believe that?
I think he did. And God's put on my heart, mine and my wife's, we started a foundation. All the proceeds from the book are going to the foundation. It's called defenseresourcesfoundation.org. And it's to help other people that are wrongfully indicted for self-defense throughout the country.
We'll put that in the link too. So we'll get you covered. We'll spread the word. And I want to thank you for your time and sharing your story. And I appreciate the lively debate. I think more people should be having this kind of debate, right?
Most people don't like to do this anymore. I love to do this.
Yeah, you got to do it. I mean, everyone's all, I go, just shut up and listen to the other guy for 30 seconds, right? You might learn something.
Exactly.
Thanks so much. We really appreciate it.
Mookie, God bless you, and God bless your family. God
Thank
bless
you.
you.
You too.